Once again, we're staying in our metal plate underscore 002.dwg file. We're going to take a look now at developing a dimension style for use with our dimension annotation. Make sure you're in the Model tab, and just a little bit of housekeeping, just go to the Layers drop down and you'll see that there's a Dimensions layer available. Just make sure that's your current layer in AutoCAD as well. And like we did with text styles, we're going to stay in the Home tab on the ribbon and expand the annotation flyout here and pin it open. Now, as per previously with the text styles, you can go to the Annotate tab and you'll notice there's the Dimensions panel. You can also click on this arrow here. That will open up the Dimension Style Manager as well. I'm going to work from the Home tab, Annotation Flyout, and pin it open. Now you'll notice at the moment the current dimension style is annotative. We'll get onto annotative later. What we do need to click on is this little icon here, Dimension Style. Looks like a dimension with a paintbrush on it. Click on it and it will open up the Dimension Style Manager. Now we need a new dimension style, so we're going to click on New. Now, the new style name is going to be very basic. I'm going to call it Training _ ANNO in caps. Now, the reason that I'm putting the anno there is it's annotative. So we're going to start with the annotative style, use that as our template, tick the annotative box there, and we're going to use it for all dimension types. Now, you can create dimension styles for specific dimension types. Just make sure that is set to all dimensions. Click on Continue, and that will now open up the new Dimension Style dialog box, and there's our Training Anno name at the top. Now, we need to work across all of these tabs, okay? Now, there's a lot in here. Some of it you do need, some of it you don't. I'm going to give you basically Sean's ideal default dimension style. Now, we will use some of the settings, but not all of them. So we'll create a nice optimized dimension style that you can then reuse later on and create other dimension styles from it. So, dimension lines. Dimension lines are the line between the two arrowheads on the preview. Now, we want to make sure that all of these are set to by layer, because then everything adopts to the properties of the dimensions layer that you're using. And that's really helpful because obviously then you've only got to go and change the properties of the layer, not the properties of 250 dimensions, for example. Baseline spacing, we'll set that to 10 millimeters. Extension lines are these little vertical lines here that extend to the geometry, and then obviously you can see you've got the dimension line between the extension lines. Again, set all these to by layer. It's a lot easier later on down the line. So I'll make sure that they're all by layer. We can extend beyond the dim lines. That's where the extension line goes past that little arrowhead. I normally set that to 2.5 millimeters. And the offset from origin is the little distance between the extension line and the geometry. I normally set that to 4 millimeters. If I just press tab after typing in 4, can you see that little gap there is now 4 millimeters when we're placing our dimensions? We're going to go to symbols and arrows now. You'll see that we're using the default closed filled arrowheads. That's fine. I would suggest, though, with your leaders, maybe go for something like a dot so that you can distinguish dimensions from leader lines. Arrow size, I'm going to go for 3.5 millimeters. Center marks, I normally set that to none now, because we do actually have center marks and center lines as AutoCAD objects in later versions of AutoCAD. There's an arc length dimension. You can have an arc length symbol. I normally leave that as preceding the dimension text. All the other settings you can leave as they are, and you can investigate those later. I'll go to the text tab now. Now this is where it gets interesting. We can set a specific text style for our dimensions. So if I go to the drop down here, you'll notice we have DIMS model. Now that was saved in the drawing for you to use. It's a default text style, and you'll notice, can you see, it's got all the settings in the preview there that you need. Text color, again, by layer. You can have a fill color. Notice I've got a yellow fill color. It's up to you if you want to use that. I normally set that to none. Text height, I'm going to change that to 3.5 as well to match my arrowheads. You can put a frame around the text if you wish. Notice the preview updates. I'll take that off again. Text placement vertically above the dimension line, horizontally centered on the dimension line. The view direction should be left to right. If you set it right to left, it looks a bit weird, but sometimes on specific types of drawings that is used. Left to right is what we need. We need the offset from the dimension line. Make that 1.5 millimeters in this case. And then you've got 3 different alignments for your dimension text. You can have them all horizontal, like so. You can have them aligned with your dimension line, which is probably the better one because it's a bit more economical on spacing. ISO standard, anything that is a radius or a diameter will have that little horizontal sort of crank to the dimension there. I'm going to go with aligned with dimension line. It's just the most economical for placing dimensions. The fit tab, you shouldn't need to touch anything. The only thing you need to check is that it is annotative and it's ticked. And that should be ticked anyway because you set annotative when you started creating the style. Primary units. Now, you'll notice our unit format is decimal. And at the moment, you can see that we've got 14.1128.07. Now, I'm going to change this because all of our dimensions are exact. So we could go all the way to 8 decimal places, which looks a bit messy, but we're going to go for just that, like that. We just want regular dimensions. Now, the decimal separator becomes inconsequential, but you've got 3 options: period, comma, space. Period is in essence a decimal place, but because Autodesk are an American company, it's called a period, not a decimal place. Comma tends to be more European, and space tends to be manufacturing a lot of the time. So just make sure that's set to period in case you do use a decimal place. So if we went back to 0.0 there, can you see we've got a decimal place? I'm going to set that back to no decimal places for the precision setting. You can add prefixes and suffixes if you wish, but be careful. Obviously, all these dimensions are in millimeters. So if you put a suffix there of mm for millimeters, I'll just press tab. Notice that's great, but then you've got 60 degrees millimeters. Doesn't quite work. So just be aware of that. That's good when you're creating dimension styles for specific dimension types. Scale factor will be 1. Zero suppression, well, we don't need to worry about that. We won't have any zero suppression, but if you've got anything trailing after the decimal place, you can set that there like so. Decimal degrees, again, I've set that to a precision of no decimal places for now. Now, ideally, you should really maybe go for 1 decimal place, just in case. Now, the reason that that is 60 degrees there is if I switch the trailing off, can you see it's 60.0? Trailing 0 switches off like so with the 0 suppression. Now, alternate units we're not going to use, but you could use them. If I display alternate units and change that to, say, architectural stacked, can you see there now? I've got the metric dimension and in brackets, I've got the architectural stacked dimension, which is in feet and inches. We're not going to use alternate units, so make sure that's unticked. Tolerances, we're not going to use any. But as you can see, there's various settings. I could go for deviation there. Can you see? We've then got plus and minus values. So we can have an upper value and a lower value and a scaling, etc., etc. Make sure that is set to none. Tolerances tend to be used for cutting lists and cutting out metal or wood, for example. So once you've got all of that set up, you can click on OK. Takes you back to your Dimension Style Manager. Select Training Anno. Click on Set Current to make it the current dimension style and close, and you'll see that Training Anno is now your current dimension style. You can click on the flyout here and select whichever dimension style you want to use. Training Anno is the one that we'll be using in our drawing.